It's that time of year. Can you smell it? Can you hear it? It's coming. Oh! Hell yeah, baby, the NFL's back! 9 long, torturous months of radio silence from the football end. A cold and dark 9 months when we can't sit down on a couch all day and watch the pigskin get tossed around. Those hellish months are over. And in a short period of time, we finally get to watch NFL football once again. With the season nearing and my channel being so full of basketball content, I finally thought, hey, this would be a good time to release my season predictions for the NFL year. With how wild the NFL is on a yearly basis and the common twists and turns that happen, and the expectations placed on the shoulders of some players, it'll be fun to sit back and relay exactly what I think will happen this year. So, without further ado, this is the most objective, correct prediction of exactly what will occur during the 2024 National Football season. We're going to start with the AFC East. Now, the AFC overall is pretty strong. I'd say 80% of it has a really good chance of making the playoffs, and the AFC East is no different. Last year was mainly a two-horse race between Miami and Buffalo, but with major changes to a few particular teams, the outlook that previously held last year is sort of shaken up. Who is the favorite team to come out on top? It's a pretty interesting question. At the bottom, though, it'll be the New England Patriots. This is a shock to no one. For the past 2 seasons, the AFC has been projected to be a 3-horse race between the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins. Both times, the Patriots ending up on the bottom. I don't really see a way of them escaping this either. The Patriots have obviously committed fully to a rebuild with no plans to contend this year. The team represents that. There is some kind of issue or detriment at almost every single position. Their pass rush is a bit of a concern since they shipped off their best player in Matthew Judon for a third, and Christian Barmore is out indefinitely with blood clots. Their offense is going to be non-existent this year since their wide receiver core, which already isn't the greatest, is dealing with injury, along with the fact that their offensive line is a bit of a concern too. With that being said though, the Pats have a plethora of young pieces they could center their team around. Christian Gonzalez was lights out before he got hurt last year, and they picked their quarterback of the future in Drake May, who definitely will start sometime this season. Even though there's not a lot of outright talent surrounding him, he has a high potential piece in Polk that he could build up some sort of offense with. Week 1 versus the Bengals, I could see something brewing with the Bengals potentially not having Chase, but like seriously, the Bengals aren't losing this against the Patriots. Week 2 versus the Seahawks would be a much closer matchup, but again, I can't really see the Patriots scaling the upset this early in the season. I actually have them losing the next 5 games. At this point, Brissett is out and May would probably be in, and there might even be a super low chance that Barmore returns. This is where I think the Patriots pick up their first win. Obviously, they wouldn't be favored, but maybe May has a huge day connecting with Polk, and the Patriots secondary that could be a lot worse gives the passing game some trouble. There is going to be a game this season where May explodes and forces the Patriots win. I think this is that game. After that, I think they only win 2 more games. I can see them upsetting the Dolphins. Tua could very well have an off night and throw a bunch of interceptions, or May having his way again on a random night. I think the Pats will win around 3 games. Their ceiling is about 5. I can see it going a couple of ways for them. May could flash a lot of stuff for the Patriots, pushing them into extremely competitive matches with much superior teams, and maybe win Offensive Rookie of the Year and get himself a couple more W's. But there's also an inverse of this, a scenario where his situation around him is so horrible that it's a disaster season for him and the organization. Kind of similar to a Bryce Young situation from last year. I think the Patriots are slightly more talented and hope they have the coach that could steer them away from that direction. Overall, nothing's going to happen this season for them. A win in their book would be May performing excellent and forming a connection with Polk, and maybe 4 or 5 wins. I think May will perform decent, flash some incredible ability, and get around 3 to 4. The MVP of this team would be Christian Gonzalez, and the breakout player would be, I'd say watch out for one of those pass rushers to emerge. Last year when I think Judon got hurt, that pass rush stepped up and played pretty well. In the third slot, we'll go the Buffalo Bills. I feel like this season is sort of a bridge one for Allen and the Bills. They had to cut ties with a lot of quality players in the offseason, especially in the secondary. Not only that, but they also had to ship off Stephon due to his clear disapproval of what was happening with the organization. With there being so many holes on this roster, I think this is the season to sort of plant seeds and begin the retooling of the Buffalo Bills. I actually don't think Diggs' departure is that devastating, since he did practically nothing during the second half of last season, and the Bills still turned out relatively fine. They drafted Keon Coleman, who has the potential to replace Diggs' production, at least down the road. And as for this season, look to rely on Kincaid and the tight ends for that production. What I'm more worried about is the moving parts in that secondary and defense. They do have Rasul Douglas, who is a serviceable cornerback 1, along with a few solid pieces, but things get iffy after that. I think they split their first 2 games, losing to the Dolphins. That early in the season, I can't see them having the continuity on offense without Diggs to keep up with the Dolphins' high-charged offense. And I definitely don't think they have the secondary to slow down Hill and Waddle. I have them starting out 2-3 before going on a bit of a win streak. After that small win streak, they have 2 very tough games against the Chiefs and the Niners. I think they split that. I have them beating the Chiefs and losing to the Niners. They win the second game of the Dolphins series and split with the Jets. This overall gives them a record of 9-8. I could see a very realistic world where things fall apart. Douglas doesn't play like cornerback 1 and the entire Bills defense gets torn to shreds. Keon Coleman doesn't pan out well his rookie year and they have to rely on Curtis Samuel as a first option. Offensive line went through a lot of reshuffling in the offseason, and I'm not saying it'll fall off a cliff, but there's an area and chance for regression. The floor probably leaves them at like 5 wins, but in the scenario where Coleman excels, it would probably put their offense right where it was before, arguably better. I think they could rack up 10 wins with ease and push to 11. Still, I think this season will function as a bridge year to the Bills and leave them in 3rd place with a record of 9-8. Second in the division, Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are now 2 years deep into the Tyreek Hill era, and both seasons have transpired pretty similarly. They would kick things off super strong, being undefeated for a short period of time behind elite play from Tua, before things would suddenly crash down and they'd fall out. This year, the Dolphins hope desperately to break that streak. Fortunately for them, they lost 3 huge pieces with Hunt, Wilkins, and Xavier Howard, which forced the Dolphins to kind of pivot. Even with the major losses, I don't think it's a complete death sentence. They added smaller signings like Jordan Poyer to try to piece together what they lost in the offseason. With Tua, Tyreek, and McDaniels, the potential will always be there for them to perform at an elite level. They just need to do it to perform. The concern is about Tua's inconsistency or his ability to play with pressure. Without that, the rest won't matter. I think this season starts similar to prior ones for the Dolphins. They bear 3 playoff caliber teams to kick things off and overall start 4-0. But I actually have them splitting with the Pats, which I know seems ridiculous, but with the Dolphins being scorching hot and having evident holes on the team, I can see Drake May, he's going to be in at this point, having a huge game and outshining the Dolphins. I also think they lose to the Colts, who are a much more formidable opponent. With Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, their rushing attack will just be a little too much for the Dolphins to handle. I also feel like Buckner can attack a potential weak point too. I think they split the next 4, being upset by the Raiders. This is a time of year where Tua starts to falter a little. With that ridiculous defensive line the Raiders have, I could see a potential disaster class from Tua, and maybe a Devontae Adams explosion to pull off the upset. For the rest of the season, I have them defeating the Packers, splitting with the Jets, beating the Texans, losing to San Fran, and defeating the Browns. That gives them a record of 11-6 and puts them firmly inside the playoff race. I don't think the fall off from Tua will be as worst as it's been for the past 2 years, but I do think his play would plateau a little bit. Obviously, think some concerns will arise in the postseason. Finally, the Jets. I know, you're tired. Tired of the expectations, tired of the antics, tired of the hype that has surrounded the Jets for the past 2 seasons, and especially after the debacle that ensued last season, you don't want a repeat of that. But I will say here, once and for all, this Jets team is legit. And I know, I'm a Jets fan, and I'm biased, and I won't act like I'm not. But when you look at this team, I believe with my full chest that this is one of the most well-constructed rosters in the NFL. Now, of course, I don't think I need to go over what happened last year again. Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Zach Wilson had to step in, and hell broke loose. Zach spearheaded the worst offense in the league and turned the Jets into an absolute disaster. And while people may have looked at the season and written off the Jets, I still have hope. Not only is Rodgers coming back, but the Jets have actually gotten better. There were only 2 major roster issues with this team going into the year. They fixed them. They revamped the offensive line, signing arguably the best tackle in the NFL in Tyron Smith, while also retaining solid pieces like Simpson and Moses. They also added a bona fide wide receiver too in Mike Williams. There isn't a single hole on this roster. That doesn't mean there isn't any questions though. The obvious main component is health. Will Tyron Smith be healthy? He was last season. Will Mike Williams be healthy? Or even 100% coming off the torn ACL? And the biggest question mark of them all, how will Aaron Rodgers look? Now, I'm not gonna try and predict injuries, that's stupid. But I think you could tell by the record that the Jets passed this season with flying colors. Now, I'm all against torture, right? I don't think torturing somebody is a good thing to do. That being said, if you have the time, I implore you to watch the Jets games from last season. Words can't really describe the load the Jets defense had been carrying, but if I were to explain it, I would say that the Jets defense would shut down opposing offenses on a weekly basis, praying that some sort of offensive production would come and give them a win. It would never. That's why you had scores like 13-8 versus Atlanta, or 15-10 against the Pats, or 12-16 against the Raiders. All losses. The Jets last year with a league average offense go to the playoffs. This offense they have right now has top 5 potential. I have them starting out scorching hot with a 5-0 record. They take their first loss to the Steelers before going on a winning streak. I think they split the next two. The Jets struggled against the run last year, so AR-15 will put enough strain on them. After the bye, they beat the Seahawks, split against the Dolphins, beat the Jags, and lose to the Rams. I think the Jets are the only team in the AFC East that improved this offseason. Dolphins and the Bills had to put band-aids on major holes in their team. And while yeah, they're good, the Jets were the only roster that actually took a step forward. It's hard to express how locked down this defense truly was, but I don't think there's a lot of defenses that has truly given as many high-tier quarterbacks the fritz as much as the Jets defense did last year. Even when you look at the year before and how locked down they were all year, it's kind of wild to see. The issue is that the Jets offense was so horrible that if the defense made one mistake, the game was practically over. That's not the case anymore. With an offense as high potential as this one, having, in my opinion, a top 3 defense in the league, it's a death sentence for opposing teams. Of course, it's not perfect. Injuries are a huge concern. And while if Aaron Rodgers goes down again, or if Tyron Smith adds another injury to his long list of injuries, the Jets will definitely take a hit. If Aaron Rodgers goes down or somebody gets injured, I could see them going to 10-7. I know what happened last year is bad, but they don't have Zach Wilson anymore. With a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who I think is a starting caliber quarterback, I feel like he could ride the ship enough to lead the Jets to a decent record. If we count injuries, I could see them dipping to 9-8, 8-9, 7-10 maybe. But the ceiling of this team is so high that I wouldn't be shocked if they make it to the Super Bowl.